I was trying to avoid that joke. But yeah, this is a minimum viable conversation, and all you're going to hear, the whole entire talk is run an experiment. So we'll talk a little bit more, and then Andrea inspired me. I think we'll get some of your risky assumptions out there, and we'll see if we can design 2 or 3 experiments on the spot. A couple house cleaning things. It's weird calling myself an expert, but I guess I've been doing this stuff for 5 or 6 years. Give credit to Eric Ries for the actual term, lean startup. Who's heard the term or read the book? Cool. Who thinks that they are a lean startup? They're running experiments. And someone else said before, like, I hate giving lecture. I don't think I'm a lecturer. Like, I like rolling up my sleeves with the teams. I think that's why they keep inviting me back. So I like working with you. So pull me aside. Like everyone else said, don't pitch, but like I always ask you, like, what problem are you solving? What's your next riskiest assumption? And how do we design an experiment around that? And that's actually, crazy enough, what I'm doing now for a big corporation. So I'm on an internal team, which is really cool. We're at Pearson. Who's heard of Pearson Education? So I'm on a very small team of really awesome people, you know, on one of these innovation teams and running experiments there too. So that's pretty much all I do. Experiment, experiment, experiment. That's the whole talk. All right, the only thing that matters. What are some themes this morning? The other speakers did such a good job of like sort of identifying themes. So what's the only thing that matters? Yeah, that's it. Traction, product market fit. It's guided by what you want in the first place, but then how you get there and how you measure that, it's traction. And that word delusional came up a couple times, but that's why. It's not just because, like, you know, VCs are greedy and they want to see money, but entrepreneurs do, and myself included, you know, they tend to be a little bit delusional, and that's why I sort of got started in lean startup in the first place, because it was the first thing that was like, not show me the money, but show me the evidence. Like, that's where it became so powerful to me. It's like, run an experiment, show me evidence that why you believe this is true, or at least is going to be true soon. So yeah, so to me, that's like the only thing that matters, and then lean startup is the way to get to the thing that matters. Does that make sense? So here, like I was here for a while. Who's seen this slide before? I think I may have even shown it here. So everyone's here, like in the vanity metrics, and just shoving people in the funnel. And you know, you sort of want to run experiments to get to here. Someone just threw out the number 1,000 customers. Sometimes you start with one. Make one person happy, create value, add value, and create value for one person, and know why you did it. I say you can't. You don't know how to do it again. You don't know how you did it until you can do it again. So like, get someone through the funnel on purpose, right? Like, know how you got there. Someone else just talked about an epiphany. I think it was with Uber. But what was the example someone just gave? Which one? Yeah, and then there was another one after that. Understand why, not just like, oh, we got 1 billion people to do X. Like, the second you can double down on why, everything changes. It's like, it becomes like you're cheating. And to me, running experiments is how you get there. Is Andrea in the room? Who else is familiar with pirate metrics? Metrics for pirates are. All right, take me off the hook and you can tell the whole room about pirate metrics for 30 seconds. Start reverse. So what are the really important ones down at the bottom? What is this guy doing? This guy's doing referral, but yeah, you know it. What? Yeah, you can start in I guess that's why they call it R. So you can start. So. The three R's you can sort of interchange, but yeah, revenue, retention, and referral. So to me, though, that's like, when you have either revenue, someone's actually paying you, that's evidence. If you have referral, that's social proof. It's not just social proof like, oh, go buy this thing, but it's currency, it's evidence. And retention, of course. I mean, if someone comes back and says that, there's no better evidence. And then a lot of other speakers talk about, you know, how to grow after that, but I think you really need to focus on getting there first. So that was my joke. Like, my whole talk is, you know, experiment, experiment, experiment. Thank you very much. But But last year I talked about like growing big, and it was sort of another little bit of like a shtick. And the punchline was start small, right? That's sort of what I was talking about before. Like, prove it once and then grow. You know, everyone wants to grow right away. You have to start small. You have to run experiments. So this is, who's seen this video with like all the people like flapping and failing at flight? You have to run experiments. My friend Steven's going to talk about, what'd you say, call it last night, good science versus bad science? Or if someone wants to get him off the hook, what are the components of a good hypothesis and a good experiment? Come on, it's almost lunchtime, and you've been sitting here trying to make this a little... All right, you have to start off. All right, yep, testable hypothesis, fair enough. Yep, good, some scientists in the room. How do you make it repeatable? How do you make it testable? Yeah, so quantifiable with measure. So that's my favorite, like, simple. It's humbling sometimes when I talk about science and there's like physicists in the room and they know much better about the scientific method. But if you have, when I ask an entrepreneur, how are you testing that? It has to have a number in it and it has to have a date, right? If it's just going to be, when's this experiment going to end? Oh, kind of when I'm right. Like it doesn't work, really. So yeah, I believe this is going to happen, quantifiable by this date. You know, I can talk forever about experiments. That's all I basically do. So, yeah, testable hypotheses. I have three. Oh, it's not animated. This guy was like walking like 1,000,000 miles an hour. So, speed is another thing. Oh, the GIFs. These were good, but all right. Who's seen? It's an American movie, but anyway, three unanimated slides. But the point is, you have to go fast. A lot of other people are talking about. Like, you must, who said idea to launch in 6 weeks? So whether it's a launch or something, you have to get in front of real customers. You have to test things quickly. And I cannot stress that enough. All right, cool. So this is going to be the fun part of it. So you should be testing the riskiest things first. A lot of time, and I made this mistake myself. I ran a company called Naborrow, which was a peer-to-peer borrowing and lending site. Everyone, it was the utopian vision of sharing stuff. It was sort of the Airbnb for stuff. Years and years ago, it was like, a reporter called me last week. She reminded me that it was 10 years ago. I keep thinking it was like last year or 2 years ago. But we wanted to prove the little things, like just sort of to like ease our way into the water. You need to test the riskiest things first. Otherwise, you're going to get there anyway in 6 months or after $10,000 or $2 million in funding or whatever the case may be. And you're going to learn something then that you could have learned. So there are really cool hacks of sort of isolating variables, bending time. They're not sustainable. Paul Graham says do things that don't scale. But they're very good ways of sort of isolating to the end and testing things independently. Sort of you can hold some variables constant and test that thing that's the most risky assumption at that time. That to me is like sort of, you know, when you talk about growth hacking and like these experiments, like that to me is the coolest thing when I start, and that's hopefully what we'll do now. Hopefully it's impressive. We'll see what happens. But if it's not, it's an experiment anyway, and I can embrace failure. So either way, I win. What was I going to say? So yeah, like the time when you can tell, and they're like, we're testing this, this, and this. It's like, well, once you get there, you still have to prove this. Let's prove that now. Does that make sense so far? I'm going faster than I thought. I thought it was just going to be like, experiment. Thank you. Yes. Except for this is the time where we're going to sort of slow down anyway and open it up to the... So who's working on something really cool? So this is the most... You want to test things that are most unknown and most crucial to your business model, sort of simultaneously. So you want things that are all the way up in that corner. Who's working on something? Cool. Who's working on something? Well, who's working on something that thinks they have a risky assumption that they want to test next?
That I want to test. Well, we've launched already, so.
And this is always the fun part. Like whenever I talk to an entrepreneur, I'm like, "What problem are you solving?" And years ago, nobody would be able to answer that question. Now everyone can answer that question. So it's like, and then I'm like, "Oh, well, you should talk to customers." And they're like, "Oh, well, we've talked to customers." And it's like, "Oh, well, then you should do this." Well, we've done that. It's like I'm not trying to root against entrepreneurs, but I am trying to get to that final level where it breaks and then help them test that. So great. There's always something that you can test next. Like if you have great activation metrics. Okay, let's prove a retention metric. I think it was in Turkey when we were talking, someone was like, oh, we signed up all these customers, signed up 100 customers for a year, they're paying X. I was like, great, I'm not trying to knock you down, but let's test retention. Nope, and this goes back to my speed thing. We can't test retention because everyone is locked in for a year. You know, and so this was the hack where I sort of was like, you can bend time a little bit. Well, okay, I hear what you're saying. You might not want to go out to everyone in your company, but what if we just take 10% and see if they'll renew? You know, you can come up with a reason why it's time to renew their contract for a discount. Like, there's always a way, even if it's non-scalable, to test a variable ahead of time. Does that story kind of make sense? They didn't have to wait the full year, is basically my point. There's ways, if that's what they really wanted to learn and that's what they decided was the riskiest thing to test, then test it. Make up some story why they have to renew earlier. But if retention is the thing, test that now. Don't wait 12 months. That's the only thing that like bothers me. It's like, oh, we can't do that for 3 months, or we're waiting for this to finish. It'll be 3 months or a year. It's like, no, do it now. Okay, so what do you think you want to test?
One thing that we're talking about is
we'll try to keep everyone engaged. Come up here with me, maybe they can. Is there a microphone? How much time do we have? 5 minutes? Do we have lunch right after, or we have one more?
No, we have Justin after you.
Okay. Test one. Wow. So just a little bit about what we're doing. Just in the past few months, thousands of journalists are losing their jobs. So the journalism industry is creating a lot of freelance journalists. And these are not just journalists. They're copy editors, they're videographers, cameramen, and whatnot. And they need a home, right? So we've created an app that stops this guy from like... So we've created a home for them. So as a freelancer, you can set up on a profile on our app, and you can find jobs, freelance journalism jobs. And one of the things that we're trying to test is payment in app. So how do we get these guys paid? How do we get editors to pay these freelancers? We started 3 months ago, and we've grown at the rate of 200 freelance journalists every month. So we're at 600 users right now. And one of the things that we're debating is, how do we test payment?
You're saying you want to test if they will pay you?
No. So we're not a middleman. So we have editors on the app and producers who want to find and commission freelance journalists for jobs, but then we also want them to be able to pay them using our app, because that's how we make our money. We make a commission off of that.
All right, cool. So it brings up one good point, which is the thing I was talking about before, is that there's always a hack, and don't worry about sort of it not being scalable. I might answer your question in context in a second, but it was like, payments is such a good example. It might not be a good example for you right now, but let's circle back to you in a second. There's times where like a team will be like, oh, we're integrating mobile payments X, and we have our integration, but we're waiting for our paperwork to go through, and I'm not recommending people skirt paperwork and do things the right way. But I've run experiments where it's like, reply to this email, to pay here, and it's ready instantly. Or obviously a PayPal or whatever's, PayPal sponsored the trip last night, we could plug them. So I always try to use local examples, but PayPal was pretty good last night. So put a PayPal button in, just see if see if it's even worth investing in the next 2 months of building something. Or a lot of times, like a hack I like to use, who's heard of MailChimp or an email kind of thing? I'll put a button that says, click here to pay. And then I'll literally look into the email generation report to see who clicked there, and then I'll go email them and ask them for money. Right? It sounds too small to matter, but all that matters is that I'm getting the answer I want quickly without investing in it, and then of course I'm going to do it the right way afterwards. So I don't know if that answers your question. Maybe that provided you some.
It's easy to test. How can you test if they will pay or not? You ask them.
Right.
Yani you divide them into 2 groups. And you ask them, this group didn't want to pay, why not? This group did want to pay, why not? If nobody wants to pay, you got a problem. And the sooner you see the problem, the sooner you can build a solution.
Pricing experiments are also it advanced stages, because you usually want to test other things before that. But pricing, and someone was talking about it just earlier, like they're the most fun to test because it's literally just like everyone thinks you have to like put out one price and that's it for the rest of, eternity. You can test prices all the time. You can give 2 different prices to different people. The evidence and the numbers are right there. They're not, it's inarguable what the results are. A lot of times it's fun to charge like 5 times as much just to see, and you see that not only does your net revenue go up, but the actual convert, so more people net will pay for a higher price sometimes. It's just, I don't know, I get carried away with running experiments, but the data never lies. My co-founder and I used to argue about like every little step and strategy, and should we do this, should we do that? And then we literally went, and that's why I'm excited to be here. I'm excited anyway, but Steve Blank's gonna be here, and we went to a Steve Blank talk probably 6 or 7 years ago, and he had a slide up on the screen. He's like, test it. And I looked at my co-founder and was like, from that day forth, we still argued a shitload, but we tried to test almost everything that was like a crucial argument. So yeah, when you look at numbers, there's no real debate. And maybe you ran the experiment wrong, or maybe there's something that you did wrong, but you'll get better and better at being scientists. But there's nothing like having a hypothesis, like seeing what happens, going quickly, getting real numbers back, and then building upon that learning. Doubling down on things that are working, cutting or deprioritizing things, that aren't working, relying on numbers, talking to customers.
Very depressing result I'm expecting, but anyways, I'm going to ask this. Raise up your hands. Come on. No lunch, otherwise. So how many of you have not tested anything at all on their payment systems? Have not tested anything? All right, so you have not tested if somebody will pay you or not. Everybody's hands down. You tested. You haven't tested. Who tested? All right. How did you test it? They paid. Perfect. How did you price it? Would they pay you more? Again, that's another problem to solve. Perfect. That's it. How did you test it? Okay. How did you test it, the pricing, if it's right or wrong? Which is the wrong way of testing the market. But again, test. If you can't say people will pay us, nobody will care at the end of the day.
We do one more? Let's do one more.
Hadi. We have one more speaker. We have to wrap this up. Nobody wants to go into this.
Tester, who has an, I think we talked about retention a good deal, revenue we just talked about. Who has like an activation metric that they think they need to build the whole site before they can test it? They need 4 months to launch before they can even see if people will sign up. This is my favorite classic lean startup experiment. Time and time you get founders like, they're testing things. If people won't sign up, then none of the other stuff is important anyway. So how do you see if people will sign up without building the whole site? What's that? Fake, man. Yeah, so it's a little controversial. Sometimes I hate the word fake. So maybe it's an early pay, or it's like step 1, and then you can still provide value, or maybe the ones that sign up early, you give them a discount when you do launch. So it's not necessarily a coming soon page. To me, those just test interest, or you'll get people in your industry that sign up. I still have my Nabarro page live, and I'll get more conversions from like academics who are focused on the sharing economy than people who actually want to borrow something from my site. So that's sort of, this slide was originally about features, but it's also about experimentation, where you really want to isolate your experiment to the thing that you want to learn, not just like throw up a random experiment to see who does what. Sometimes that's helpful in the very, very beginning in exploration, but you really want to be careful about designing experiments to test the variable that you want to learn the most about now. Does that make sense? Of course. So I think there's two answers there. First, if you're just asking, can you run tests on a subset of your users? That's one of my favorite things to do. Both.
The thing is, like, we have all the customers that, for example, you could try testing. What they think that we are cheating, that we are making.
So that's the second answer. Is that don't ever. I think I have a slide in here about being scared. Well, maybe not, but this is a cool slide. Yeah, you can't. When you have science on your side, the backlash is always minimized. Like, doesn't matter if a board, whether it's a board member, or a co-founder, or investor, like, don't do that. Fuck you. We tested it, and this is the result. Like, yes, 10 people really were pissed off, but this is what we learned. Like, that startups are hard. Innovation's hard. Like, you have to be willing to do certain things to learn for the sake of learning, and it becomes your own personal, ethics call and how far you're willing to push it. But I don't know. I feel kind of strongly that you have to. Yeah, and the beauty of the answer is, yeah, you can test it on a small subset, kind of keep it contained until you have a better answer, and kind of open it up. If you realize right away this was stupid, like everyone's pissed, you turn it off and you stop and you go back for a second. But it's like, oh, people aren't that pissed. Let's go to this second. Let's go to the second neighborhood and see it and try it again, and let's do it with more people. And yeah, I love that. I think it's necessary. It's a necessary part of startups.
One thing to quote, Alibaba founder was mentioning this in a while. I have 300 million customers. If I make a change and 1% doesn't like me, it's 3 million people. And it's that big of an effect. If my business will be 1% better, I am better off by pissing 1% of the people who's not going to use me. Your job is not to make everybody happy.
Right.
Your job is to make a sustainable company grow. That's life. You can't live to make everybody happy. If you can, it's good. But if it's not good for the business to make everybody happy, then don't make everybody happy. Make the business grow. Otherwise, nobody will benefit from your total value creation.
And your job is not to piss people off either, just for the sake of pissing them off. But if you're running experiments and for the sake of learning, and you're using that learning to advance your own vision and make more people happy, like the example I'd always give is drug testing. Real human beings get placebos sometimes for the sake of science. So whenever this issue of debates and experimentation, like, you have to make your own decisions. But if you want to learn something, sometimes you have to run difficult experiments. And then just the beauty is, yeah, you can test on a smaller amount of people. You can do it off-brand, if you really are worried about, your brand. I feel like there was one more thing I wanted to say, but
There's always one more thing you want to say.
this is funnier when it's animated. But I always pretend that Albert Einstein said this, but I made it up. But I think it encapsulates everything. You want to think it, test, prove. If you're right, lean startup, a lot of times people think it's just about doing like small stuff. It's not about that. It's about doing good science and running experiments, learning stuff, and incorporating those learnings into your next experiments and into your growth, and hopefully achieving your vision, which is what I wish for all of you.
Thank you so much.